Bonjour, good afternoon. Welcome to our 28th Tree of Life Remembrance ceremony here at the Beechwood National Cemetery. Today, we'll remember and celebrate, honor departed ones, children, sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, spouses, friends, partners that are no longer physically with us, but live on in our hearts and memories. Our wish is that today you will find a moment of peace and have the opportunity to honor them before the holiday season that unfortunately will never be the same without their presence. Today's event, it was recorded ahead of time to be in compliance with current COVID-19 regulations. Bienvenue à notre 28e commémoration à la chandelle autour de l'Arbre de Vie, ici au cimetière national de Beechwood. Aujourd'hui, nous célébrons nos êtres chers, frères, sœurs, enfants, pères, mères, conjoints, partenaires et amis, qui malheureusement ne sont plus physiquement avec nous, mais qui vivent dans nos cœurs et dans nos pensées. Notre souhait aujourd'hui, c'est que vous puissiez trouver un moment de paix et avoir l'opportunité de leur rendre hommage avant le temps des fêtes, une saison qui malheureusement ne sera plus jamais la même sans leur présence. Nous avons enregistré la cérémonie à l'avance afin de se conformer à la réglementation en matière de santé publique pour la COVID-19. My name is Antoine Babinski. I'm a volunteer and member of the Board of Directors for Bereaved Families of Ontario, Ottawa region, and I will be your MC today. Il y a maintenant un peu plus de 7 ans, mon fils aîné, Michael, nous a quittés. Il est décédé par suicide et son départ soudain a bouleversé et chaviré notre vie familiale. Totally desperate and seeking anything to alleviate the pain of the loss of my son, it is BFO volunteers that really helped me. They made a big difference for me. Why? Simply because they had felt similar and lived through similar losses, and their guidance, support, advice made a difference. If I'm a volunteer today, it's because I believe in BFO's support services, and I believe that anybody going through my situation should have the support I received. Today's event is special since it is taking place for the first time by video due to COVID-19 assembly restrictions. We therefore ask you for your understanding for any miscues. If you lose connection, just return to your invitation email, click on the same link to return to the celebration. Despite the current pandemic environment, the BFO Ottawa Board of Directors felt it was important to maintain the event considering the number of families who have lost loved ones and have to deal with the added burden of not being able to gather with all the relatives and friends to celebrate their lives as they would have liked to. We hope this ceremony will bring you solace. The program will unfold as follows. Following this introduction, we will have a poem reading and then welcome our guest speaker, Alana Keynes, who will talk about her grieving journey following the death of her husband, Brian Smith, 25 years ago. Afterwards, we will have the dedication of the tree, followed by a candlelight remembrance ceremony centered around 1 minute of silence. Cette cérémonie sera spéciale puisqu'elle est diffusée par vidéo pour la première fois à cause des limites au niveau des rassemblements causés et imposés par la COVID-19. Nous demandons donc votre compréhension et patience en cas de problèmes techniques. Si vous perdez votre connexion, revenez simplement à votre courriel d'invitation et cliquez à nouveau sur le lien pour rejoindre la commémoration. La cérémonie se déroulera comme suit. Suite à cette introduction, nous entendrons la lecture de poèmes suivie par le discours de notre invité d'honneur, Alana Keynes, qui nous parlera de son cheminement du deuil suite au décès de son mari Brian Smith il y a maintenant 25 ans. Nous aurons ensuite l'hommage à l'Arbre de Vie, suivi de la cérémonie à la chandelle et d'une minute de silence. At this time, I would like to thank Nick McCarthy, Erica Wagner, and all the Beechwood Cemetery staff for their support in assisting us with putting this event in such an amazing and peaceful venue. We truly appreciate your support. I would now like to invite upon Karen, one of our volunteers at BFO, as well as Michel Deloge, member of the Board of Directors, to come to the podium to read a poem for us.
The tide recedes, but leaves behind bright seashells on the sand. The sun goes down, but gentle warmth still lingers on the land. The music stops, and yet it echoes on in sweet refrains. For every joy that passes, something beautiful remains.
Quelqu'un meurt et c'est comme des pas qui s'arrêtent. Mais si c'était un départ pour un nouveau voyage, quelqu'un meurt et c'est comme une porte qui claque. Mais si c'était un passage s'ouvrant sur d'autres paysages, quelqu'un meurt et c'est comme un arbre qui tombe. Mais si c'était une graine qui germe dans une terre nouvelle. Quelqu'un meurt et c'est comme un silence qui hurle. Mais s'il nous aidait à entendre la fragile musique de la vie, poème par Benoît Marchand.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Michel. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today's ceremony, Alana Keynes. Alana has kindly accepted our invitation to share with us her experience and insight acquired through her long grief journey. Please join me in welcoming Alana Keynes.
Thank you, Antoine. And thank you for having me here today. This has been a good exercise for me, too. You said kindly accepted. It's been wonderful for me to tell my story to myself again and to others because it's part of the grieving process. Because we don't get over it, we get through it. And even though 25 years ago, my husband was fatally shot leaving work, which was supposed to be a safe place. He was going to work. He was supposed to be safe that morning, and he was fatally shot. But like you, I'm here to celebrate the lives of those we have lost. Although I like to say to celebrate the memories we have of those we lost, who are now resting in peace. So I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a grief counselor, but I have a story to tell. And years ago, someone told me, one day you'll tell your story and help somebody else with their survival guide. Because when Brian tragically passed 25 years ago, I received an outpouring of loving kindness words, letters, phone calls, faxes, remember those, and that overwhelmed me and helped me through it. And so now I'm going to tell you my story. And it was August 1st, 1995. And I remember that morning very clearly. Suddenly, I got up early because I had the greatest story to tell in the business department. I was a business reporter at the Ottawa Citizen. And I woke up, and I was going to be front page news. I was going to tell my story on the front page. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of classical music because someone told me that if you listen to Bach, the composition, actually the way it unfolds, helps your thinking, helps you to write. So I was listening to Bach that morning, writing my story in my head. And then Brian came along and he started ballet dancing. He did pirouettes and leaping and plies. It was very cute. And I said, I've got to go. I've got like the best story in the world. Kissed him, told him I loved him. I'll see you tonight. And I did see him that night in terrible shape, of course. What happened that day was every night I would go to watch his newscasts with the sports section people, the journalists. We'd watch his newscasts. He was my husband. And he had Mickey Mantle on that night. And Mickey Mantle was talking about organ donations and for people to sign their donation cards. And lo and behold, later that would come to play in this horrible story that would unravel. Minutes later, I heard on the scanner shots fired in CJOH at the time. Now it's a CTV affiliate, but a man down in the parking lot. And being a cub reporter years earlier, I thought maybe it was nothing. Then the phone rang, and it was my first question to the reporter at the time was it him? And they said, yes, but he's okay. They said that in order for me to get there safely. So I arrived at the station, and it wasn't as planned. And he was seriously injured. The prognosis was not so bad at first. And then later that night, he was going into surgery, and that was the telling point whether he would survive or not. And I remember saying to the surgeon, it's a brain injury, but can you let him live? I'll take care of him no matter what. And the surgeon went in and then came out saying it's very bad. It's very bad. And I remember, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling in your throat. It's just a horrible feeling. But anyways, so what happened after that was we had to deal with the fact that he would slowly brain die. But that night on the news, Mickey Mantle and the organ donations, and it was a thought in the family. There was a small gathering. He was in ICU. There wasn't a lot of room for everybody. But we made a decision that night that really started the legacy of Brian Smith. And I don't even remember making that decision. It was a fog at that point. But about 36 hours later, there was a phone call saying, it's done. 13 people have been helped. We had 5 people whose lives were saved or dramatically altered, and at least 7 more people who would have benefited from the bone marrow in his cornea. And I remember at the funeral, Margaret Trudeau said, who got his beautiful eyes? He had beautiful eyes, beautiful, loving, caring eyes. So that was the beginning of the funeral process, and the people who attended the funeral were anyone from senators to the homeless. He had touched so many people. And I didn't realize that until he was gone. The number of times we went to restaurants and he would tip very generously. And I would say, oh, Brian, that's a little much. I'd say, no, it's not. These people work hard. And then one time we were at a restaurant patio, and this man walked by and recognized Brian and said, because Brian was a well-known sportscaster, and said, can I have some money for beer? And, I'm saying, no. And he did. He gave him money for beer, and you know what he said? He said, just bring back the change. And he later said, well, he's honest. But guess what? That homeless man showed up at his funeral with the change and put it on his coffin. So we touch people when we don't think we're touching them. And Brian was well known. He was on air every night, and he liked to go out. We both liked to go out because he wanted to know what people were saying about sports. And he touched people, some people just for a few minutes at a time. But he was always kind and never said no to any conversation. And to this day, he teaches me to live like that, to be kind, and to every conversation is important. And so after the funeral, I got angry. I got very angry because it wasn't fair. And but I didn't want to live like that either. I wanted to make sure his legacy wasn't for naught. And so things just started to happen. First of all, the organ donations, and then we started something called the Brian Smith Foundation. And I, with the media people, which I'm thankful for the support for that. And suddenly we had over $130,000 in overnight, just from leveraging his love for the community and the community's love for him. And I realized then that he wasn't just our Brian. I thought he was just our family Brian. He was the community's Brian. And at times I was resentful. I thought, well, if he wasn't so well known, we'd still have him. But I think there was a plan here for his life, where he could have this legacy. And then we also worked towards changing the Mental Health Act, because the man who shot him was mentally ill, and maybe there was a way to prevent the entire issue. And so somehow we did it through Richard Patton, who was a Liberal MPP at the time in Ontario and wasn't even the government in power. And the act was changed, and now it continues to be there. It's called Brian's Law. And it was actually 25 years later, it was challenged at the Supreme Court of Ontario, and it survived, because it was the way it was written was so well done 25 years later, so that the law allows people, families generally, to bring their loved ones to the hospital and keep them there, and allow them to leave the hospital with community treatment orders so that they can leave based on certain conditions. And it's a good law. But Brian's legacy, what I'm most proud of is the Brian Smith Foundation and the Boys and Girls Club. We set up a partnership. And Brian was a member of the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa, and they're now everywhere. They're everywhere. And he was first a member, and then he became a counselor of their camp. And he did so much work for them. And so when the Brian Smith Foundation, with the money that we had accumulated over time with this Canada's largest golf tournament for many, many years, and we eventually gave it to their camp, the Boys and Girls Club camp, which Brian attended and loved, and shaped him into who he was. And the camp survived. It was run down. The dining room was run down, and they were ready to close it. So Brian's tragedy saved this camp. To this day, helps so many kids. That is the biggest part of his legacy for me. So, and I still talk to people today, and they say, "Oh, do you know the story about Brian?" And I'm sure people out there are still hearing stories about their loved ones. I did not know that Brian, when he was in Los Angeles playing for the Kings, the franchise year, he played for the Kings, and he dated Donna Douglas, who was Ellie Mae for the Beverly Hillbillies. He never told me that. You'd think that's something he would tell. First date stuff, hey, by the way. But anyways, he was so humble. He probably thought I'd get hurt for it. But anyways, he was, I still to this day hear stories about him. And he was such a loving, kind man. And but some good can come out of tragedy. And that's what soothes my heart. And I do, every now and again, like you can go to a place and say, yeah, but if he was here today, my life would be different. Or, wouldn't he have loved watching the Masters with me? But I don't go there because he is with me. And so, I've come to terms with him not being physically with me, but having those memories in my heart. And Alfred Lord Tennyson said, "We are a part of all that we have met." And he was a part of all those people he met who lined up to go to his funeral. Certainly a big part of me. I learned from him today. I said that. And the people around me, and he, even his own dad, who I never met, he passed before I met Brian. We would be on the golf course, and he'd say, "My dad would say today, how can you not believe in God if you see all this?" And whether you believe in God or a higher power of some sort, it was, we would just enjoy that environment. And Brian filled every part of his day. If we were, behind a foursome that was slower than us, whatever, he would start doing sit-ups on the tee. He'd start doing sit-ups. So he filled every moment of every day. And if there will come a time when it's not. There did come a time when Brian wasn't the first thing I thought about when I woke up, or the last thing I thought about when I went to bed. So 25 years later, he's still a very big part of me. And so my ornament today, I do have a tree story. I'll tell one more story. Brian and I, how couples have this, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And I told him I'd be a palm tree, because it's somewhere warm and resilient to hurricanes. And then he said, "I'd be a maple tree." And I said, "Oh, okay. Why, Brian?" He said, "Because I like maple syrup on my cereal." He was a very uncomplicated guy. So this tree of life means a lot to me. We did plant a maple tree at the camp, Camp Smitty, and it means a lot to me that tree continues to grow and be resilient. And this tree of life is a symbol for that. And so my ornament says, "Brian Smith, forever in our hearts, forever our inspiration." Because he's not my Brian, he's everybody's Brian, I know. And I'm going to hang it on the tree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alana. First, thank you for driving all the way from Windsor to come and be available for us and to provide with us such a honest, warm testimony. I particularly like when you say you don't get over it, but you just get through it. And I truly believe in that. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. You will now see to my left stands our symbolic tree of life, holding all your ornaments and messages. It's meant to be without any religious affiliation. It is meant to be inclusive for all of us who grieve. Elaine Dean, who's a co-chair for BFO, will be putting the last remaining ornaments on the tree. Comme vous voyez à ma gauche, c'est notre arbre de vie symbolique qui se veut sans aucune affiliation religieuse, mais qui inclut tout le monde dans la communauté qui sont en deuil. The tree of life signifies the ongoing presence of our loved ones who have died. These people hold a revered place in our hearts. And here this afternoon, with all of their names written on ornaments for all us to see, we allow ourselves this time to honor them and our cherished memories of them. Trees stand tall and strong. And this is significant as it represents the deep-seated roots that we have with our loved ones who have died. Let us dedicate this beautiful tree this afternoon to all of our loved ones as we remember them and continue to love them and make them part of this afternoon's ceremony. L'arbre de vie signifie la présence constante de nos proches qui nous ont quittés. Ces personnes occupent une place très spécial dans nos cœurs. Cet après-midi, l'arbre porte tous les ornements avec leur nom et leur message, afin que nous puissions tous les voir et nous permettre de les honorer avec les souvenirs qui nous sont chers. Les arbres sont grands et forts, et cela est significatif, car ils représentent les racines profondes que nous avons avec nos êtres chers qui sont partis. Dédions cet après-midi ce bel arbre à tous nos proches et continuons de les aimer, de les faire participer à la cérémonie de cet après-midi et dans notre quotidien. We will now begin the Candlelight Remembrance ceremony. We now invite you to dim your household lights and to lit your candle. During the moment of silence, that you send silent thoughts or words to your loved ones. You may extinguish your candle at any time during the time of silence. Nous allons commencer la cérémonie à la chandelle. Nous vous invitons à ajuster la luminosité de votre pièce afin d'allumer votre chandelle, de prendre un moment de silence et transmettre des pensées à vos êtres chers. Vous pouvez éteindre votre chandelle à n'importe quel moment durant la minute de silence. I will now invite Daniel Reed, who is a member of the Board of Directors for BFO, to light the candles. For those who have loved and lost along the way, a flame to remember them burns here today. For laughter, smiles, and memories remain together today, their presence sustains. Never forgotten and loved forevermore. Today, their blessings flicker and soar. Pour ceux que nous avons aimés et perdus en cours de route, une flamme en souvenir d'eux brûle ici aujourd'hui. Pour les rires, les sourires et les souvenirs qui restent, ensemble, aujourd'hui, leur présence se maintient. Now, please join me for a minute of silence. S'il vous plaît, maintenant, joignez-moi pour une minute de silence. We are coming to the conclusion of this memorial ceremony. Today's event was made possible by the generous support of many of our volunteers. An enormous thank you to all of you who donated to BFO and took the time to join us today for this ceremony. Every year, BFO Ottawa supports up to 2,000 people and provides over 120 support groups as well as 2 memorial events. We added an additional service focused on loss by substance use et nous avons commencé à offrir un service et un contenu en français. We follow a peer support model where trained facilitators work with participants who share their own stories with others, offering a safe place to discuss and share. Nobody likes to talk about grief, but it is a service so greatly needed that helps with the grieving journey. In times of pandemic, this support is more needed than ever. All this is made possible thanks to donations like yours. We are proud to say that despite the COVID-19 pandemic, BFO has resumed its service offering online to maintain its presence in the community. This virus has created anxiety and economic uncertainty, leaving individuals, businesses, and small charitable organizations like us in a precarious financial situation. While we know you are solicited by many worthy causes, we would appreciate any donations that you can make throughout the year, big or small. You can donate by visiting our website and click on the Donate button or call the office. Bien que nous savons pertinemment que vous êtes constamment sollicité par de très bonnes causes, nous apprécierions un don pour BFO Ottawa au cours de l'année, qu'il soit petit ou grand. Il aidera à réduire le nombre de personnes qui vivent seules dans leur deuil. Vous pouvez faire un don en visitant notre site et cliquer sur le bouton « Faire un don » ou simplement communiquer avec le bureau. I would like to take a moment to present to Alana a small token of our appreciation. I'll just put my mask on. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alana.
Thank you. You know, my gift today was meeting everybody here from this organization, and I think a donation to this organization goes miles. It really is an organization of people and not bricks and mortar. And I'm learning about this organization, and I'm spreading the word because I think a donation here goes a long way. Thank you very much. Can I open it?
Of course you can.
Okay.
Of course.
I love the box. And I enjoyed meeting everybody here today. And it would have been nice to have a few more here, but COVID just keeps on giving, doesn't it? Oh, how nice. Thank you very much. It's olive oil. It's a gift box of, I don't have my glasses on. Can somebody tell me what it is? It's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Raspberry jam, blueberry.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love all that. Okay. Thank you so
You're,
much.
you're so welcome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being here, and it was a good exercise for me. Definitely.
Thank you again,
Thank you.
Alana.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I encourage people to donate. Thank you.
Ornaments will be taken down by our volunteers and mailed to you as soon as possible. Les décorations seront enlevées et vous seront livrées par la poste dans les meilleurs délais. Merci à tous et à l'année prochaine. Thank you all and see you next year.